Welcome to my talk on delivering enterprise commerce simply and how we brought multiple brands under one roof for our client, Hunter Douglas. I'm Matt Sutherland. I'm the head of tech at True, and this is my third year as an MVP with Umbraco. And at True, we are platinum partners and we are contributing partners, and we spend a lot of time working with the community to improve the world of Umbraco. And Hunter Douglas, they are a big global enterprise brand that basically focus on window coverings. So if it's blinds or shutters or curtains or anything that can cover a window, they're interested in it, and they want to make your house look a little bit like this. And they guarantee that as well, the letter. So Hunter Douglas is actually an umbrella brand for Hillary's, which in the UK, many of you will have seen. They're an installation company. Blinds to Go, which is direct to consumer. And these three at the top, Custom West, Arena, and Eclipse, they are all trade brands, which means that they sell to tradesmen who then go on to sell from there. And Eclipse is basically wholesale, so they sell the component parts that might make up a shutter or a blind or a curtain and so on and so forth. Arena is made to measure. That's where you go to them and you say, our window is 2.2 meters, et cetera, and you get the actual thing that you're after. And Custom West is similar, but in the Shutterverse. I said Shutterverse then, nice. And the purpose of this talk is to give you three things, basically, which is how we brought multiple brands under one roof and our considerations as we went through that process, the considerations that shaped how we made our tech decisions, and our approach to collaborating with the internal development team that was there at Hunter Douglas. So let's start with the brief. And actually, that was really just three focused areas, which was creating the platform for that house of brands, managing the product complexities. So you may not know this, but to get a blind onto your window, there's 10,000 or so product options or complexities that might be part of the choice in terms of actually configuring and creating that blind, whether that's colors, whether that's material, and various different things. So we had to try and take all of those product options and all the complexities that go alongside it and try and bring them to life into one single platform, and then empowering their team to work on that platform after we had initially built it, and to work alongside them and collaborate alongside them to get them to where they needed to be to take this forward. So let's start with creating the platform for a house of brands. And as I said, there are multiple brands under the house of Hunter Douglas. And for this, there was also a brand change that was happening internally, which meant that Arena and Eclipse were going to start to form Hunter Douglas UK Trade. So not only were we changing multiple platforms into one, but we were also needing to figure out how we could turn multiple brands into one and push forward that Hunter Douglas UK Trade name. And the reason they wanted to do this is because of the market. So when they were by themselves, they actually sit over here in Eclipse and Arena, you can see there, as specialists. And we wanted to move where they were in the market to basically become that all-in-one one-stop shop, for want of a better phrase. And that means that if you were to if you were to be a wholesaler, maybe actually we might be able to start thinking about providing made-to-measure services for you, and vice versa. Maybe if you're made-to-measure, we'd actually be able to start thinking about how you could order things from Eclipse. And I like to-da moments, but I was told that I shouldn't do that. So I'm going to show you the design as early as possible. And you can see what we did here. So we moved Hunter Douglas UK Trade into the top, but we still left Arena and Eclipse as a bit of a focus. And this was just to kind of illuminate that whilst the brand was changing, they weren't disappearing. So this was a key focus, was that users needed to not be alienated as we changed their platform for them. And what we started to do from a design perspective is start to bring those wholesale products forward and really focus on the fact that we could think about how we can improve the user journeys for people that are coming onto this platform and potentially seeing stuff that they're not necessarily used to seeing going forward. And the reason and how we did that is at True, we always take a triple diamond approach to our projects, and that basically looks at discover, define, and deliver. And if we look at the first diamond, this is where we're really focusing on understanding the user, understanding the requirements, and understanding the overall strategy so that we're best placed to inform the design and the implementation perspective. So the way that we did that was really focusing on the user. As you can imagine, there are people that are so used to using Eclipse and just focusing on wholesale. There are people that are really used to only using a platform that's focused on made to measure. And we are trying to make sure that those two types of users are facilitated in this new platform, whilst also potentially creating a new type of user, which is someone that is used to using and interacting across both of those types of brands. So that's a real focus on user experience. And to help us do that, we started to create user types. So we have Maria, who is made to measure seller. We have Robert, a manufacturing dealer, and Mike, our business owner. And I know you're not going to be able to see all of this on the screen behind me, but the important bit here is that when we look at what Maria is interested in, we can understand her goals, we can understand her user needs, and importantly, we can understand her pain points. So when you couple those with the key motivations that she has to enter the platform, you start to see that we're able to understand where her pain points are so that we can improve those, and what she already is able to do and what she needs to be able to do so that we can continue to empower her to be able to do that, whilst also making sure that when we think about the situations that she might find herself in, that we're facilitating each of those as an individual user journey, which is where we look at her ordering replacement parts. Again, you don't really need to see this, but what you should care about is these emojis at the bottom, basically. We want to make sure that if there's a scenario where she's upset interacting with this platform, that we have the opportunity to improve that and bring a new way of thinking to those user journeys. And we applied that same thinking to Robert, who is our manufacturer and dealer, and our business owner, Mike, who is basically the person who we believed would be interested in what was predominantly before an Eclipse user journey and an Arena user journey. So that's a lot of information that allows us to think about the user, basically, and that's really the overarching point here. And as we went out of Discover and into Design, on a second click, this is what we're thinking about. So we're not only taking those user needs that we've understood, we're going to turn those into genuine requirements and genuine user journeys, but also this gives us a start of what we need to consider around the platform. So I came out of our Discover phase thinking that really the brief onwards was empower, improve, and don't alienate, which is essentially empower the user to do things that they might not have been able to do before, improve existing things that they were able to do, but can we iterate on them and improve them as the platform goes forward, but make sure that we're not alienating them. If there are things that are genuinely working on the previous platform, there is no need to reinvent that wheel. Let's make sure that we're focused on them, but not leave them behind. And we also spotted a few opportunities. This was mainly around speed. So can we have slicker product configuration? Can we remove some of the clunky elements that were there before? Can we look at how search and discoverability can be improved? Can we actually focus on the ordering across brands? So someone that was traditionally looking at wholesale, can we get that cross-pollination and simplifying the information architecture to get someone to where they want to get to as fast as possible? And that also gave us a long list of platform considerations, which I won't go through in totality, but really what I like to come out of Discover with is a brief for our architecture going forward and our platform going forward. And really when you boil this down, this was, can we create a platform that is capable of growing alongside potentially many new requirements? A global brand like Hunter Douglas can bring many new situations in. They could buy an entire new company and bring them into the platform if they so wished. So we need to be able to react to that. Can we set it up as quickly as possible whilst also allowing it to be reliable and scalable and so on and so forth? And importantly, can we really solve this product issue that they had, which is that there are so much complexities and so many things that we needed to understand across all of their different products, which nicely ties us into the second part of the brief, which is managing the product complexities. So there is no single source of truth, or there was no single source of truth when we started this project. So this, George in the front row, and she had to literally go to the website in some circumstances and try and understand where some of the configuration of the business logic was, because it wasn't documented anywhere and it wasn't easily accessible. We also had Literally, there are printouts, there are books that have specific tech specs inside them, and obviously they get shared, and they are actually where some of the source of truth lives for some of the data for some of these products, which is interesting. And as Philip said, they have the most common PIM on the planet, which is the Excel spreadsheet, but there are hundreds and hundreds of different Excel spreadsheets which are governing product configuration and really salient pieces of information that are driving huge parts of their business and their product, which, as you can imagine, they get out of date very quickly, right? So we've all been shared an Excel spreadsheet which has _V2 on it or _latest and so on and so forth, and that definitely was prevalent. So if I was to set up my data and believe that it was absolutely true, or as soon as I've passed it on to someone else and they've edited it, there is an issue with how reliable that data set actually is. So we needed to really focus on that, and also all of those platforms that I highlighted, and in particular Arena and Eclipse, they are on different platforms. There's no shared data structure. They're not on the same. One was on Umbraco and one was on Magento. There's no shared ERP at the time, and a lot of the data that's set on top of the product options. So say how we would configure things is basically governed by XML. They had a lot of rules that basically said if something is so high, or if the drop is a certain size on a blind, then only certain things are compatible with it, and those compatibilities were driven by XML, which again can be quite clunky, and you had to actually hand code in some circumstances, which was being done by the Hunter Douglas team. So that was all really to say that handling so much customization and those products is really complex. So we needed to make the right choices to overcome those challenges, and to help explain how we did that, I thought it would be nice to play a little game of buzzword bingo. So, there we go. That's the energy that we need, okay? So, okay, good. Bingo. I mean, it's Codegarden, and I was quite happy because a lot of these were used in the keynote. So, Composable DXP, PIM, headless, Umbraco, AI, orchestration, MVP, and collaboration. And this is going to help me basically talk to you about how we made some of the platform decisions we made and the underpinning decisions that helped us build this architecture, all whilst hopefully stamping them off as they go. So if you notice a buzzword, just let me know, and hopefully it's about when I've got the next slide which says it's a buzzword. Anyway, so let's start with the first one, which you won't be surprised is, when I've spent so much time talking about the importance of product, is PIM. So with there being no single source of truth, it was unbelievably important that we figured out how to normalize that. So I would like to say that we used some really jazzy mechanism to normalize it all and ingest it straight into Struct, but we didn't. We did do a lot of work that meant that George here spent a lot of time looking at different configurations and so on and so forth. But once it is into Struct, we have a real life working data set that actually can grow with the platform. It can live and breathe, and when it's updated, it is consistent. And importantly, with Struct, there's some really nice product option management, which obviously is really important for us. You can share it across brands. So in theory, if new brands come onto the platform that aren't necessarily straight into Hunter Douglas Trade UK, they could be reused there. And there's the import and export capability. So those spreadsheets, there is an ability to do some ingestion and get those into Struct. And once we've got those in place, it can also give us the opportunity to export out of them should we wish. And the reason why we looked at managing this in a PIM, and I would advise you to make a similar decision, is as soon as there's a level of complexity, or as soon as that product might need to be shared in multiple different destinations, then the PIM allows you to keep that source of truth whilst being able to share it. It's a similar concept to headless, essentially, which I realise is a buzzword, which is coming later, so don't worry about that one. So let's have a little look. Struct's really nice in the sense that it's actually built on top of Umbraco, so the UI is super slick. You can see here that basically we're adding a night and day pleated blind, and then adding additional options on top of it. These are customized where necessary, so we've been able to make this especially fit for window coverings business. And then Importantly, this is really just to demonstrate that what we have here is that single source of truth and that single structure that's going to allow us to manage product in a consistent way, which the real benefit when you think about how that's taken on for the rest of the platform is that we're able to look at making super complex things look as simple as they possibly can. So these are tradespeople, and they have a very specific set of use cases that they want, and they want a load of control over what that blind is going to look like, because that's what the business that they're in. But trying to do that in a really simple and slick way is quite hard, and previously you had to sort of go almost in stages, but by having Struct allow us to have that product in a single essentially in a single object, we're able to make a load of decisions in the configurator, add that to the basket quite nicely, and drive price and so on and so forth, which has been really difficult for them in the past. And that's all underpinned by making the choice of the PIM, essentially. So we've got our check mark, which means that we've started our process. We've got the PIM checked off. So AI, the biggest buzzword going. And last year, I stood on stage and showed the AI hype cycle, which is basically the innovation trigger exists. We have a load of inflated expectations of it. We then get slightly disappointed, and we have our trough of disillusionment. And the real value can often be in the slope of enlightenment and the plateau of productivity, which are beautiful words. But basically means as soon as you don't realize that you're interacting with AI, that's probably when it's really, really working quite well. And for us, a lot of that is around the ability to use content recommendations, product recommendations, things like AI-generated synonyms for search and personalized search. And Algolia is a great tool for allowing you to do that. Because when we think again about trade users, these are super users, so they often know what they want to do and how to get, and they want to get there as quickly as possible. So one of the advantages of using AI-generated synonyms is that, for instance, for someone who wanted to go and find a gold, whatever this one is, Elegance Gold Vertical 89 millimeter, it's very jazzy, they can literally search for gold, but then they also might just know the product code. And actually, just typing in the code, they get to the same place. That's not game-changing, but it's really valuable for a trade user, because when you apply that same technology and you put it directly in the basket, they might have added one thing to their basket, and then they're just able to rattle off all the product codes and really quickly build up their basket, which when you're thinking about people that are potentially time poor, that's a massive win for them. And ultimately, some of those you could type in, you could tell you what the product code is and so on and so forth, but the generative ones actually will find the bits that you might not have understood about what your user might be searching for and still start to provide you with those generated synonyms. So you might find out what else someone is looking for when they're still looking for that gold product. So, and the other thing that Algolia gives you is it allows you to personalize the ordering in which some products are returned. So in this circumstance, this is a single trade user, and the PLP listing is prioritized specifically for them. So what we don't want is for someone to have added all those filters that you saw at the top there, given us enough information, and they still have to get to the 12th or 15th product before they get to the thing that they want. So by using Algolia, we're able to react to what people are doing and react to what that specific user is doing and personalize that priority of that ordered list so that we're able to give them exactly what they want, which is a really cool use case, but not necessarily as jazzy as some use cases for AI. So that's AI done. How are we doing? We're doing good. Okay. So next up on the bingo list, we have, what do we have? We have headless, great. And I really like this quote. So 80% of businesses that don't have headless architecture today say they plan to implement it in the next 2 years. And that was 2 years ago. So it's been really interesting already this week, where at the Business Summit it was discussed around headless, and MVP Summit it was discussed around headless, and do we still care? And I think for Hunter Douglas there were some really important decisions that helped us decide that absolutely we should care, and I'll talk to them about them in a minute. But for those of you that don't know what headless is, it is basically where we decouple the front end and the back end. So we had one app, we split those into two, and we're able to separate those out and connect them through API. So the front end just listens to the API that the back end's providing, and that gives us all the content and whatever we might need from the back end. So from our perspective, our back end is Umbraco. No one's going to call it, okay? That's another buzzword. Woo, yeah, there we go. Posh. Great. So now we have two on the go, okay. And with Umbraco as the back end, we have the content delivery API, so we can serve that up to multiple front ends should we wish. And when we think about what that means for Hunter Douglas, initially, actually, we were just launching with one. So we have the Hunter Douglas UK Trade platform, but we still have that API listening to the content delivery API, and all of that is being served from the Umbraco back end. And the reason why, I mean, that would be enough. But actually, when we do think about the fact that we might want to bring other brands onto the platform, like Custom West, as I mentioned, or potentially Hillary's in the future, if they were to conform to that same content delivery API, then they would be able to consume the data from the Umbraco back office. And the flexibility here is the bit that's important, because Custom West, in theory, could just live its life in the future under the brand of Hunter Douglas UK Trade, and that would be absolutely fine. But they might not, and they might want to have their own UI, they might want to have their own theming, they might want some governance over their look and feel. And as long as they have a similar structure that they're expecting from their content, then that's absolutely okay, and we can make it look however they want it to be. And that's a real positive for them, because it allows things to continue on their roadmap, basically, for Hunter Douglas. The other advantage is that when we have the front end separated from the back end, we can look to scale each of those apps individually. That separation becomes really important, because not only can we scale those apps, we can think about security in separation as well. So you may well want your back end to be IP restricted, or to have real governance as to who's able to get to your back office. And this gives you the ability to do that, because you can really lock down the back end, and you can figure out how you want to manage the front end. So for someone who wants to be SOX compliant, that is a real advantage from a security perspective. So Hunter Douglas and Headless meant that they are able to manage those multiple brands in one place. It's easy to update. So one key thing as well around it being Headless is, in the future, if you just wanted to update the UI, that means you only need to release that application, which saves all of that compute in terms of deploying them all at the same time. It often reduces the risk, because often it's the back office or the back end code that might give you some bugs. And that ability to choose and pick and choose when you're going to update something makes that whole process a lot easier. We're also able to adopt to new and ongoing requirements and pick and choose when those sites are released, which is really nice. And the second part of the Umbraco buzzword is Umbraco Cloud. So our back office is Umbraco Cloud. And I was at the Umbraco Cloud Roadshow probably 2-ish years ago or something like that, and said, I don't believe at the moment that I would want to put an enterprise commerce platform onto Umbraco Cloud. But a lot of the things that Bjarke mentioned earlier, around WAF, around the dedicated resources, around external login providers, has made it a genuine option, and it's working really well for Hunter Douglas. And having that separation also allows us to still use it in a headless nature. So actually, we have cloud using the content delivery API and still serving up the front-end applications as we so wish. And then the third Umbraco, which was a little bit of a shill, is commerce. We use Umbraco Commerce essentially as a product object manager. So it helps us with our cart, but essentially it consumes what's in Struct. It makes it really, really simple to pass that object around, and then we're able to export that off to SAP. And there are loads of good things in commerce, but fundamentally, we're really only using it as a great product object manager, as a cart manager, and in the future, we're hoping to use it for things like quotes, which haven't been put into the platform yet, because you can do frozen pricing and stuff, which is really, really nice. So we have Headless ticked. We've got a twofer. We now have Umbraco tick. So we're there. There we go. Look at that. So The next decision that we had to make when we've gone through those previous ones is composability. There's another great quote, which was, by 2026, at least 70% of organizations will acquire composable DXP technology over monolithic suites, which is basically, for monoliths, it's when they used to try and do everything for you, basically. And as Philip said earlier, composability is all about choosing the best of breed. And for us, we know that that means that you're building an architecture that starts with the platform decision of Umbraco as the CMS, but it allows us to adopt to all of the requirements that we might have, including some of the buzzwords that I've just suggested, and build that architecture with our building blocks as and when we need them. So composability allows us to have launched with content recommendations and search and product management tool, whilst knowing that the rest of these were potentially on the roadmap, and that actually other parts of Hunter Douglas business might have already made decisions about those. So composability allows us to, when necessary, bring those into the platform and not need to worry about, okay, there's actually a different decision to one of the vendors we've already discussed. How do we adapt to that? And does that mean that we need to rebuild? And in the past, changing an ERP system or a CRM system has been very difficult to do, and might need to actually mean that you need to rewrite a load of business logic, where hopefully taking an API first approach and focusing on composability has stopped us needing to do that. And there's a really nice quote again that is basically saying, as requirements and clients grow, so can the website, and business success no longer means complete rewrite. And that's really important, because we often get given these RFPs for, build this thing, but actually we all want as an output of that they are going to be successful. But then have you created a platform that somehow can't grow alongside their own business success? And composability allows us to really, really think about that. And then I wanted to show you an architecture diagram, just because I like showing architecture diagrams. And they look cool because someone designed them for me in Figma. And then just a little bit of a nod to SAP. So SAP was a project that was running alongside it, which Hunter Douglas were working on internally. This put a bit of a dependency on that being ready. And actually for us now, albeit that I said we were going to do quite a lot of things in SAP, we're consuming 3 data points, and that's kind of it. And we'll slowly start to iterate more on that. We're hosting the front end in Azure. We're using Nuxt.js for the front end. And albeit the back end says it's hosted in Azure, it's because it's cloud. That's fine. So that is our composable architecture, basically, and the rationale behind it is that flexibility, which gives us another check mark, which is great. So we now go on to orchestration, which I made a prediction that this was going to be the buzzword of the week, and thankfully it sort of came true when Philip announced Umbraco Compose, which thankfully I was unable to put into a slide. We didn't use an orchestration tool for Hunter Douglas. When we were looking at the architecture, it was definitely a consideration, but I think there's some quite interesting decisions to make around orchestration, and obviously Umbraco Compose is very much in its infancy, so it wasn't even available to us. And I think going forward, it would really be a consideration for us if we were to do this project again, because when you think about an architecture that looks like this, being able to have the data aligned in the way that Compose might be able to provide for us is really, really important. However, I do think that if you're building platforms that are API first and that you do genuinely lean into composability as a format, you can manage to do a successful composable architecture without necessarily the need for orchestration. So there's both, in these circumstances, we always need to think about what the user needs and actually what we're emphasizing and what we're improving for them. So I think the word was backlash, which I kind of love. But sometimes it's okay for people to go to multiple different platforms to edit and administrate where they need to. And actually, this separation that this gives us is that the merchandising team can just focus on what the merchandising team needs to do. The product development team can just focus on what the product development team needs to do. And the marketing team can just focus on what they need to do. And that's not to say that orchestration removes their ability to do that, but you do need to think about what the task is that you're asking someone to do and make sure that whatever we're doing in the back office and wherever that back office is, that we're really focusing on improving their day-to-day, because when I'll go on to collaboration shortly, this is all about how products and platforms can live slightly sometimes in absence of us, because we're supposed to be empowering people to do their day-to-day job. So it's always just a consideration to make sure that we're thinking about that. And that's my little rubber stamp on orchestration, which then leads me on to MVP, I believe. There we go. So you've sort of heard me talk a little bit and insinuate basically MVP without saying it, which I've really struggled not to say MVP as I've gone through this process. But a lot of the previous decisions have all been around how do we make an initial platform that is as successful as it possibly can be, whilst also making sure that everything that might ever be needed for that platform, might be a stretch, but we have a long-term roadmap that's available to them. And I'm just going to show you that architecture diagram again to then talk about, we could have multiple front ends should we wish to. We were considering Umbraco Engage as a potential route of managing some of the personalization that might sit out the side of this, and all of those elements that were in Composability, in my Composable DXP element, that didn't make the platform yet. The point is that we're supposed to be able to, and when we think about the roadmap for this platform, it might include bringing an entire different set of products on in Custom West, which might come with their own decisions around other tools that are needed. So focusing on a successful MVP now allows us to think about what comes in the future. But what I will say is that also establishing exactly what the MVP is a real valuable and big part of any long-term project success. And actually, I think that on reflection for this project, we probably needed to nail that a little bit harder. So I'm going to talk a little bit how we worked with Hunter Douglas. First of all, stamp. Okay, we got it. And how we collaborated with them to try and help with some of those things, but also highlight some of the situations where maybe we needed to lean in a little bit harder and sort some of those stuff. So collaboration, which actually brings us on to the third part of the brief, which is empowering their team. We needed to make HD as ready as possible for this platform, whilst also making sure that all the decisions we made throughout this process were as well communicated as they could possibly be, and make sure that they're along for the ride and that we're removing all of those to-dar moments. So I wanted to put that logo in so that I can do these next two slides, basically, which is True and Hunter Douglas, ultimate collaboration, and then Bosch. Thank you. That's the only reason that I put this talk forward. I wanted to show you a little bit of what we talked about at pitch level and also what some of the reality was. So we had this slide where we talked about a retained team, which is a retained team from a True's perspective with an element of flexibility on it. We then discussed MVP, this is at pitch stage, and roadmap and optimization and some of the things that we wanted to do. So we actually worked in 4-week sprints, and we were focusing on P1s and P2s. Racy. Now, this is a very boring slide, but let me just humor me. There are lots of names on here, so there was lots of people that needed to be informed. There's lots of stakeholders, and getting a Racy right at the start of a project is unbelievably important, because when you get it wrong, things really start to go sideways. And I think we did a good job of establishing roles and responsibilities, but sometimes through certain ceremonies and so on and so forth, I think probably we could have been better at rechecking that actually the person that was giving us a level of approval was still the person that was responsible for that approval. At the start of the project, we also talked about roles and responsibilities from writing user stories. And the reason why you do certain boring things, maybe say, alongside this to help operationally is because it allows you to understand when you're deviating away from it. So we started as the people that were writing the user stories, and then it moved to the Hunter Douglas team, and then it sort of became a mixed match of both of us. And that's okay, as long as it's understood that that's what we're doing. Because Otherwise, it's sort of, you can end up with sort of assumed responsibilities between collaborative teams, which can be quite difficult to manage. So let's talk a little bit about those teams. So the team from TrueSide was predominantly these 6 people alongside front-enders from a development perspective. And this is because I also wanted to say, thanks to Rich becoming MVP this morning, that means we had 6 MVPs on the project, which is pretty cool. And we brought in Warren to help us halfway through the project, which was great. And the team at HD included a lot of different people as well. So they had 5 developers, they have 2 QA resource, they have 3 project managers, they have a load of SAP specialists, and their team is massive, basically. So the real sort of collaborative sense of this was really important to make sure that stakeholders and so on were managed, which is why we have those RACI documents and everything else. And with the goal of empowering their development team to work on this platform, at the end of this project, I put forward 3 steps, basically, which is what HD were responsible for in blue and what we were responsible for in orange. And basically, we were responsible for most of the development tasks, deployments, and so on and so forth. And they were responsible initially for just the approval. Is it doing the thing that we said we were going to do? And we set out to do 5 sprints, which is, like I said before, were 4-week sprints. And the bit here was go live at the end of sprint 5. And I won't give a spoiler, but we did more than 5 sprints. But we set out those goals, and again, this is about, if you set the goals in terms of how you're going to get there, then hopefully it means that when you deviate, you're able to highlight that you're deviating, and going through the cycle, we've had all the right ceremonies, we had prioritization, we had all of those moments. But what we needed to do was make sure that we were really focused on the outputs of those ceremonies, because the second step was, presenteeism in those ceremonies, because the second step was actually getting their team to work on the platform that we built. So after those 5 sprints, we did start to bring in their team on solution onboarding. This is the way we like to do it, which is basically to go quite deep into the code. So we did workshops which were recorded and were collaborative across front end, across back end, across some of the tooling that we'd selected, to basically give them self-writing documentation to allow them to have a point of reference should they need to going forward, and give them the support that they need, alongside using the build pipelines and creating pull requests as a way of governing, actually, if they've written a line of code, is it something that we can accept into the platform, and so on and so forth. So we did this process to help with step 2, which is where they do start to be parts of the platform and contributing. So the blue is they are supporting the True team in developing further sprints, which, as I alluded to, there were more of them. I don't know why we ended up with 6.1 and 6.2. I think that was my fault, but I couldn't tell you the rationale behind it, but just think that there's additional sprints. Anyway, so we needed to do additional sprints. Some of that was around the prioritization piece. And again, that comes back to what is the MVP, and if different stakeholders have a different idea as to what that is, then sometimes you can find you're getting more and more scope into the project, which they aren't expecting to be new scope, but we're expecting as new scope. And that's fine, because as we're able to talk about it and have those ceremonies to discuss it. We went live with wholesale initially, which was basically all of the Eclipse users. And then we had further work through sprints 8 and 9, which led us to the 3rd stage, which is actually where most of the section is blue, and we become a part of the supporting system. So we're still working with Hunter Douglas, we're still helping them with UX and strategy and so on and so forth, and we're working really ingrained in their development team. There's a level of ownership that's on their side, which is ultimately part of the goal. Which is testament, because they went live this week with additional made-to-measure products, and our involvement has basically only been support system. So it's proving that collaboration pieces are managed to support them in that way. There's a really self-indulgent slide, which mainly is just when you look at Andy Carley over here. So these were quotes that he gave, but Andy was supposed to be with me this week, but isn't up, wasn't able to make it, so we were going to be doing a tag team, so I thought I would make sure that he was on there. Hello, Andy. And the point really that he makes along this side is that because we collaborated with them, the tooling is fitting the bill, and actually from a development perspective, his team are able to do things they weren't able to do faster now, which really shows that actually the collaboration piece has worked which gives us our final little check mark, which also gives us all of the things check marked. Thank you. We'll get there, we'll wait. So what I said was I was going to provide you with the considerations of bringing multiple brands under one platform, how and why we made those tech decisions, which hopefully all the buzzwords have sort of helped me articulate, and how we collaborated with internal teams, which means that we did do the things we were going to say, which does mean bingo. Thank you. Thank you.